Uh, Speaking of freak offs, okay, Robert, I read the indictment against Puff Daddy. I will tell everybody this right off the bat. I think he has been up to nasty no good for years. You go back and you watch Get Him to the Greek, oddly enough, with Russell Brand and P. Diddy, and you see what P. Diddy was doing in that movie. You know, in that movie, Russell Brand was the addict, and we know that Russell Brand was recovered by that time. P. Diddy was a degenerate in that movie. So I have no doubt that, look, I've seen the video of him abusing, I forget who the woman was, an ex-girlfriend. I believe that P. Diddy is up to absolute no goodness. I read that indictment. It reads like a nasty novel, but not necessarily with the requisite degrees of criminality that I would have expected after a years-long investigation. But like I said, I'm predisposed to think he's guilty, and yet, okay, so he's been indicted. 3 charges. There was RICO, all sorts of RICO stuff. What was it? Sex trafficking, prostitution. There was something about kidnapping in there. And what went on at these parties, people? Hearing a United States attorney talk about freak-offs involving, he had like thousands of bottles of baby oil, and the people would get drugged up and do like morally depraved things. The only question is whether or not there's a defense to it. Okay, fine, all that. He's been indicted, and he's been denied bail twice. Now, I think I know what you're going to say on this in terms of denying bail, Eighth Amendment violations. Just trying to think if I've forgotten anything about the facts here. Tell us what you think about him being denied bail a second time. I know a lot of people are going to say that he fled the country during the investigation, and my inclination is to read that as evidence that he's not a flight risk, because why would he come back in order to get arrested if he were a flight risk, unless he was so arrogant and narcissistic that he didn't think he was going to get indicted at the end of the day, which I think is, he might be an arrogant, narcissist, psychopath, but he's not stupid. And after a year-long investigation, they're not doing it for nothing. You're getting arrested, yet he came back, told the police where he was staying, yada, yada, yada. Denied bail on the basis that he's violent because of the video. Allegations of violence, allegations of a witness, not intimidation, but witness bribery. So he's not threatening, he's bribing, allegedly paying people, claiming to pay people or suggesting he'll pay witnesses handsome sums of money for them not to turn on him, and flight risk because he's got, all sorts of stuff. Arguments against the flight risk. You'll tell us what he agreed to, basically everything under the sun by way of bail conditions, including $50 million bond. And a judge says, no, not good enough. You go to hell on earth. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, there's the substantive charges and whether there's some weakness in those charges. In particular, like I was looking for something more clearly Epstein-esque, and at least in the charges, you're not seeing those kind of charges. Like this goes back to the other debate that I remember Scott Adams was a part of a few years ago, that other guy prosecuted in New York. When is something sex trafficking, right? If it involves a bunch of willing, complicit participants, is that human trafficking in the same way? So I think that's where there's some facts to be figured out. But everything about the case makes it appear that P. Diddy was running an Epstein-style operation and running it for a long time. Now, go back and look at the kind of people that are weirdly buddy-buddy with him. Look at the people who he gathered influence over. Look at the people on social media suddenly deleting their entire social media accounts. People like Pink, and a range of others. The Usher, I believe. Usher's from my hometown in Chattanooga. But, Justin Bieber was targeted by P. Diddy when he was a teenager. And then watch some of the behavior of people like Pink towards Bieber when he was underage. So what, the stories of Epstein in Hollywood is stories of, in politics, political power in D.C. Go back to what Madison Cawthorn talked about, that they tried to host these orgies in D.C. to try to both induce you to their side and entrap you if you don't play ball with their side. My suspicion is twofold: that P. Diddy's been running this operation for a very long time, that it involves all kinds of perversion and entrapment, that the real way you to have entrapment is to have something that people would really be disgusted by, because of the nature of the act, or that's illegal, someone that's underage, and that he likely was using it and has.
But just say there was no allegation of underage anything in the indictment, which I thought was remarkably absent.
Exactly. I was looking for Epstein-style allegations, and they're not there, even though there's plenty of other people that have said they are there. So what that, I mean, they're factually with P. Diddy, and yet strangely absent from the indictment. My read from the very first time this happened is that P. Diddy was running a blackmail extortion operation as his means of power. This is very common, and this is as old as politics around the world. But it's been especially true of the American media industry, Hollywood, music industry, etc., and American political power. And, P. Diddy was unusually connected politically. He was connected to people that are close to the Kamala Harris world, people that are close to a lot of high-ranking Democrats. It's much like Epstein. So, this doesn't have the intelligence operation angle. It appears to be more of a traditional blackmail extortion angle. But what it does, I mean, a lot of people are going to have questions about people who have been apolitical suddenly getting political and endorsing people if they have a P. Diddy connection. Because what remember the Epstein this goes all the way back. People can watch my hush hush at vivabarneslaw.locals.com about Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller was an expert at gathering this kind of intel and information. Not only was Robert Mueller neck deep in the Epstein case and the sweetheart deal given to Epstein, go back and look at the deal he did with the son of Isaac Asimov, who was one of the biggest producers of child porn in the world and managed to do, I think, not a single day in prison because Mueller took over his case. And what's unexplained, what I always look for in those cases is there evidence they seized a bunch of video files? And then do you never hear about those video files ever again? That's what happened in the Asimov case. That's what happened in the Epstein case. Watch, that's what happens in the P. Diddy case. My guess is that P. Diddy got too big for his head, decided he could blackmail and extort anybody when he was in trouble for any reason, and they decided to turn on him, and they want to control it. They want to have sole possession of all those blackmail and extortion files so he doesn't have any access to them. The Kardashians were close to P. Diddy. I mean, you can go on and on and on of the people connected and close to P. Diddy that implicate very, very, very powerful people. And I was part of a case where the IRS stole 60 million medical records of 10 million Americans, including every judge in the state of California, including every Major League Baseball player, including every major producer at the Producers Guild, every movie actor, every screen actor, and a bunch of high-ranking foreign diplomats. Because it was J. Edgar Hoover's wet dream of a blackmail file in those medical records. And you've got to assume P. Diddy had the same thing. And so I think and now he's on Epstein watch, quite literally. He's he's in the same prison, on the same floor, for the same pretext of suicide watch that Epstein was at when eternal truth number one, Epstein didn't kill himself. Are they going to kill P. Diddy? Well, he's in custody and claim it was suicide. They got away with it with Epstein. Watch them get away with it again. I think there's a way above average risk that P. Diddy never sees trial. So that's my concern.
It is, now that you say it out loud, it is incredible as to the length, the degree to which they went out of their way to deny him bail, notwithstanding everything that he offered. Private security to make sure he doesn't leave his apartment, condo, whichever, monitoring, no internet, no everything, $50 million bond, sell his plane so there's no flight risk. He's already given up his passports. But now, as you describe that, and I'm starting to put two and two together, they get him on these three, I won't say innocuous charges, but they're compared to what the allegations, suspicions were, innocuous, that have nothing to do with the blackmail extortion ring that they described that he had a setup a la Epstein in his place. And so they go in, seize everything, as we saw them do. They get all of the blackmail material, whatever, and then charge him with a bunch of RICO nonsense that has nothing to do with the underlying evidence that they have and make off with it. And the story becomes P. Diddy and drug-fueled, baby-oiled, lathered up sex parties and not the blackmail material that he must have on a great many people. Works.
It was pertinent, the Saturday movie watch at Viva Barnes Law.locals.com this week was No Way Out, which is about, it was pertinent and relevant because it was about a prosecution that is itself a red herring with another red herring, quite literally the color red involved as well. Brilliant story, much like the presumed innocent, my other favorite version of that kind of legal story. But what we've been trying to explain to people here is that sometimes a criminal prosecution is, in fact, a cover-up. The Hunter Biden criminal prosecution on tax charges was the cover-up. The goal was to make sure they could control Hunter and he wouldn't go AWOL. And at the same time, make sure that the underlying facts about his criminality running criminal operations at the behest of the Biden crime family, enriching and empowering deep state politicians in America and the administrative state still in power, that information never got public, and it never did. That was how they did the plea deal, and I predicted that they would magically have sentencing not happen until after Election Day in either case, and voila, this week, his gun sentencing case was delayed until after Election Day. That's when the pardon or commutation is incoming. We said Russiagate was, in fact, Mueller's way of covering up Spygate, of their illicit operation to spy on Team Trump and to smear Team Trump during the campaign and then undermine and sabotage his ability to engage in a détente with Russia once elected. The Epstein operation had all the hallmarks of him going AWOL, them wanting to control it, and then they whacked him when he wouldn't play ball. Ghislaine Maxwell has managed not to know enough information, but what's critical that everybody keeps talking about is that in both criminal prosecutions, they managed to never disclose who and what were the real client list. There are a lot of people who traveled on planes and whatnot. What people want to know is the real client list. And magically, all the files that they took from all the premises have disappeared. They were never used at trial in the blackmail extortion file. And they're doing the same thing here with P. Diddy. Now, my issue on bail, aside from the fact that I think this is a cover-up operation and they plan to either extort P. Diddy into a plea deal or murder him, is I believe in the Eighth Amendment. Many of my conservative allies don't. They're selective about the Constitution. They got Thomas Jefferson's version of the Constitution, but his Bible approach, which was any part of the Bible Thomas Jefferson didn't like, he just took out, pretend it wasn't there. And that's what a lot of conservatives do when it comes to the Eighth Amendment. They don't like that promise of bail. They want to imprison people without trial. They don't like it when it's done to them, but they want to do it to their adversaries or the people they dislike. So they want FTX, Sam Bankman, detained without bail. They wanted Jeffrey Epstein detained without bail. They wanted Ghislaine Maxwell detained without bail. They want a lot of your common criminals detained without bail. They get enraged at no cash bail and other protocols that encourage and incentivize bail. They want Minority Report style criminal justice. They are people that our founding fathers fought against, many of our so-called conservatives in the legal space. But I believe in the whole of the Eighth Amendment, and that is that unless you can prove by what should be clear and convincing evidence that a person will successfully flee and never appear for trial, they should be given bail. The definition of unreasonable bail constitutionally is bail that doesn't relate to appearing at trial, to securing their presence at trial. There is no better evidence that someone will appear at trial than knowing for a year they're under criminal investigation, that knowing all the evidence against them has already been gathered by the government, and them taking no meaningful efforts to actually flee.
Devil's advocate. He's such a narcissist, he thought they would not charge him at the end of the investigation.
Even then, so now that he's been indicted, if he's such a narcissist, he believes that he'll never face sentencing too. And how is it his narcissism is not broken when the search warrant is done, but magically is broken when the indictment is issued? So that's issue one. Issue two is, how do you show with actual evidence, to clear and convincing evidence standard, that there are no set of conditions other than imprisonment that will secure his presence at trial?
How do you, quite literally, they said, we'll do anything. Like, we'll do anything. And the judge said, I'm not convinced.
Yeah, exactly. Because what has happened is the Bail Reform Act of 1984, barely upheld in a 5-4 split decision by the Supreme Court, when the so-called conservatives love to eviscerate the Eighth Amendment. Those same, we just care about the Constitution and originalism. Well, then apply it to the Eighth Amendment. Apply it to all the Constitution, not just some of it. Abandoned it. And it was liberals advocating for it in that context. And so ever since then, if you're a magistrate or a district court, your only political exposure is if you release somebody and something bad happens while they are released. The fact that you illegally imprison somebody won't matter. That only offends one person. That won't cause a big public stir. How many people really cared when Epstein was found dead inside? They don't. And so consequently, they won't care when P. Diddy's found dead inside. A few people will yip about it for a minute or two, and then that'll be it. I think that if I was on P. Diddy's defense team, which I'm not going to be, but if I thought his defense counsel, I would have been hammering Epstein over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
I'd come in and say the government wants him dead, and they want you, judge, to be complicit in it. Do you want to sign his death warrant like your colleagues did with Jeffrey Epstein? Put it right on them, because these courts are such political hacks. They don't care about the Eighth Amendment. They care about the political perception about somebody politically unpopular being released pending trial. And the reason for the constitutional standard is it was known that courts would not protect people's rights. We only punish people when they are convicted by a jury in America. And what bail is that bail guarantees that. And a lot of conservatives who led the cheers against bail reform, suddenly were shocked when it was applied to them in the January 6 cases. And they're like, oh, really? That can happen? Yeah, many of you were cheering it when you didn't like it, when it was some street thug in San Francisco or New York.
Robert, just by way of example, I put this up. I blacked out the guy's name because I'm not trying to put them on blast, but this is a reply I got in YouTube. What is it with this, quote, constitutional, end quote, nonsense? Reading the first line, I thought it was going to be a joke. Between Rekieta and this is becoming a sad joke. This guy is dangerous and has every means to pull a Roman Polanski. You can't trust him. He's got plenty of money. He's got all kinds of operatives, including powerful people in Hollywood. No doubt he has several passports, and it's likely multiple citizenships. But he's got offshore money, access to planes. In other words, the ideal flight risk. He just disappeared. He's done it before during the investigation, to which I replied, if it ever starts off with a statement with, what is it with this constitutional nonsense? That might be the non-starter. But then it gets into, he disappeared allegedly, but then meanwhile came back to be arrested. And no, what's up with this constitutional nonsense? It's called the Constitution. And set aside the constitutional argument, which is compelling and maybe determinate. When you look at it as though the reason to deny him bail is to facilitate his Epstein in jail, that's exactly why you respect the constitutional right to bail pending trial, because he's not guilty yet. You might think he's guilty, and he might very well be guilty of a lot of stuff. He's still innocent until proven guilty, and denying bail is the utmost of unreasonable bail. Unless, okay.
And it represents sort of a split in the right. You have a part of the right that's very liberty-oriented, and you have a part that's really is fascistic and authoritarian, right? And a lot of them will come out, like that guy's statement. Well, what's up with this Constitution stuff, right?
Yeah, you did the same thing with Rekieta, Robert, you bastard.
Yeah, exactly. That's when you're getting the petty fascist. The petty authoritarian, and they're all over the place in the left, and they have a lot of power at the moment, but people shouldn't forget they're also all over the place on the right. And where it comes out the most often, sometimes it comes out in the religious case context, where they want to impose their religious values on everybody. But the other way it comes out is in this context, on the Eighth Amendment especially, or criminal defense in generally, or reflexively defending cops, no matter the circumstance. That's when you or defending a soldier, no matter the circumstance. That's where you get people who down deep they weren't constitutionalists. Down deep they're not, and that's the problem here. This is another example. The reason the government does it, government didn't deny him bail because they really think he could succeed in fleeing. I mean, fine. Like people say, oh, multiple citizenship. Tell me the country that won't extradite him. It won't matter about multiple citizenships.
It's not like I don't want to use it's not an ordinary. It's freaking Puff Daddy. It would be like Andre the Giant trying to flee. Like, where are you going, sir? I'm going. No, like, where are the?
And find all the examples. I mean, there are almost no examples of people successfully fleeing
Roman Polanski.
These kind of charges. One, You have to get to a country that won't extradite. That's almost no country in the world. Two, the few that won't extradite, they'll deport you. They do the same thing. They find it, or they'll allow your kidnapping. Number three. So the ability to legally escape in the modern world is almost non-existent. What you want to be is you want to be outside of the country at the time of the indictment, because then you can negotiate bail. The second, so why do they do this when they know the person can't successfully? The only people who successfully flee are people who are not citizens of the United States, who are part of a deep criminal underworld, global criminal underworld for a long period of time. They're people who don't care about and third, they're low profile people, right? They're arms runners, but they're not arms runners you and I know about. So the idea of a celebrity being able to flee charges that are extraditable or deportable for the entire world, successfully being able to do so is next to nil. They can't find any modern or contemporary example of it occurring.
Well, someone in our locals community said, "Come on, Robert, who wouldn't want to live in Iran?"
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, that's where you'd have to try to flee to, right? And if you're going to do that, you would have done that before now. But here's the reality: the P. Diddy's of the world, they don't want to live in those places. Most people who you think would flee, they never do. And remember, the standard is more likely than not that they both would flee and they would succeed in doing so. You have to prove both. There's no case where they can prove more likely than not they will flee and successfully flee outside of foreign spies, outside of foreign drug runners and gun runners.
People who are not easily recognizable, like Michael Jackson.
People have very few connections here. Why don't people flee? Everybody always assumes somebody will flee. They almost never do. Because I'm having represented many people over the years, they won't even if they're facing life in prison. Jeffrey Skilling never fled. He was facing practically life in prison. He was worth huge amounts of money. Why didn't he? Multimillionaires, billionaires never flee because they don't want to give up their lifestyle. They'd rather take their chance at trial and appeal than live in hiding under a bush. This is why the only people who do it are spies, are people who live in an illegal world their entire lives, so that living in secret is their life. Living underground is their life. Mm-hmm. If it isn't already their life, they don't do it. I've known people who tried to flee, get caught with ease. So the idea that you could more likely than not that P. Diddy was going to flee was just nonsense. I mean, again, he proved it by voluntarily coming back and being and subjecting himself to U.S. jurisdiction, knowing the risk that it entailed.
Forfeited his passport. Presume it's the only one. And we went over the terms. So what do you say? Not that there's a market for it, and I wouldn't bet on it if there is. More likely than not that he does not come out alive.
Either he's going to cut a plea deal or they're going to kill him before it ever gets to trial. I'd say about 80-90% chance of that. And that's what these people are rewarding when they're like, oh, they love it's their punitive authoritarian streak that comes out. Mm-hmm. They can't wait.
Well, no, they're
politically permitted to people. The only difference between them and the left authoritarians and the right authoritarians is who they want to punish. But otherwise, they have that deep authoritarian punitive streak, and they can't wait to punish P. Diddy because he's been a disapproved figure. And they're so eager for it, they're taking the bait on covering up criminality rather than truly exposing it, which is what this case really is.
Yeah, and it's also they've morally justified it because they think P. Diddy is guilty, therefore it justifies pre-trial detention.
Robert, they're the reason why our Constitution requires presumption of innocence, which is also protected under the Eighth Amendment, is because ordinary Americans are terrible at applying it. They say they believe in it, but they really never do.
Let me bring a few of these.